What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another beautiful day in the shop working on the Suzuki. So if you saw the last video, we got the whole front end done, suspension pretty much redesigned. We dropped down the differential and the lower control arms, that whole mount we dropped down, got some heavier springs on it. It did lift the front end like 2.5 more inches, maybe 3 inches after the springs kind of settled in, which they already have. But today I want to get to work on the rear. Like I mentioned, this thing's got like 8-inch shackles in the back, and that's the only thing they did to lift the rear of this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten the shackles back up to probably about 3 inches, about what they were from the factory. And then this is a sprung under, meaning the leaf spring runs underneath the axle. The axle is sitting on top of the leaves. What I'm going to do to get my lift is I'm going to simply take the axle, put it underneath the leaf springs, and that in itself is going to give me about 3 inches of lift. And I won't have to worry about the extra long shackles hanging way down, catching on everything, and honestly, they're just an eyesore. So here's a look at how long these freaking shackles are. So what we're going to do to start with is cut those down. Probably, like I said, I don't know, 3 inches, just so that when we get the axle underneath the leaves, we can set the pinion angle where we want it. These are the hangers, or the perches I bought. These are actually just for a trailer. They're 2 3/8 round tube, meaning this is for a 2 3/8 inch axle. So these do fit on there, hoping the center pin is the right size for that hole, but we won't know until we tear it apart. So the game plan, like I said, shorten these shackles, and then we can pull the axle out, flip it, and I'm gonna see if I can do this without pulling the axle completely out. I don't think I'll have to cut the other perch off because it's underneath. I know once we get this thing jacked up, I'll show you guys, it's underneath. We shouldn't even need to cut that off. So I'm hoping I can weld these perches on without even pulling the axle out and re-bleeding the brakes and all that good stuff. So let's get these shackles shortened up first, and then we can tear into the rest of it. All right, we got these leaves out. I was just checking this center pin, and you can see it's quite a bit too big. So what I think I'm going to try, I've never tried drilling through springs, but if I can get these bolts out, these pins, and replace them with like a 5/16 bolt like this and a 14 or 9/16 head, that fits perfect in there. So I'm gonna pull one of these apart, clamp the leaves together, pull this bolt out, see if I can drill it for a 5/16 or 8mm bolt. All right, we got these drilled out. Wasn't too bad. So I did misspeak. These originally were 5/16. I had to drill them out to 3/8, and you can see that is a very tight fit. It's about perfect. So let's throw these leaves back in and get the shackles on. We want to get the weight of the truck on the axle so that we can rotate that pinion. So we'll basically get the springs in, throw these on the axles, get the U-bolts in, and just snug it up so we can still rotate that axle and set that pinion angle. All right, we got these leaves back on with the perches in there. One thing I had to do is kind of disconnect that e-brake cable. It's a little bit short, so now I'm just going to jack it up and I'm going to measure the pinion angle. Hopefully my brake line is long enough, and you can see that drive line is pulled out of the transfer case a little bit, so hopefully that's going to be long enough. They shouldn't lift it more than like an inch from what it was before. So I'm suspecting we should be good, but we're going to jack it all the way up, get all the weight on the axle, on the leaves, and adjust that pinion, and then we can tack these perches onto the axle. Just make sure they're lined up with the old perches here. That's what I'm going to do, and that should be centered. All right, guys, we got it sitting on its own weight on the wheels and tires. So it actually lifted it quite a bit more than I thought it would. The main problem is the drive line, you can see there, is pulled out of the transfer case like I thought it was. So we're going to have to probably do a spacer back here, so that shouldn't be too big of a deal. The e-brakes, what I'm thinking about doing with those cables is just cutting that main tube right here and just rotate the whole assembly down, weld that back on, so that should be a pretty easy fix. One other thing I can do to lower this about 1/2 of an inch before I weld these perches on is I can re-drill these holes up about 1 inch. That should effectively lower it about 1/2 inch. So I think that'll help a little bit. Obviously not that much, it's only 1/2 inch, but I really do like the idea of spring over. There's just a lot less hanging underneath the axle, get a lot more ground clearance. So I think that's what I'm gonna do, is drill this hole 1 inch higher, and then we'll have to make a driveline spacer, cut up that cross member, and then this brake line, I could probably just leave it like this hanging here. I might put some fuel line or something around the inside of it, and we should be good there. So let's drill these holes and we can weld these perches on. All right, we are back on the ground. That is definitely looking a little bit better. I haven't looked at the driveline yet. I'm sure we'll still need a spacer. Well, it actually pulled it in a little bit. You can see there's no gap at all, but I got to figure out how much slip there is in that drive shaft. And it looks like the pinion does need to come down as well. So these holes definitely made a difference. When it's all said and done, I might chop that off straight just to get a little more clearance right there. All right, guys, we got this thing set up. So I'm gonna go on this flat part of the flange right here. And we got 20 and a half, 20 point, right about 20 and a half. And then on the drive line, right about 23. So we basically have 3 degrees of U-joint operating angle, which is what you want to kind of shoot for. So all we got to do is make sure these are centered on the axle from side to side, and we can weld these puppies in. All right, guys, I took a little break, did a little bit of thinking on the situation. Number one, how I set that pinion angle. That is set up for a double cardan joint like the Toyotas have, where you basically point the pinion at the cardan, and with a single U-joint, you basically want the transmission and the differential level with each other or in a straight line, and then the drive shaft. You basically want the U-joints at the same operating angles, obviously opposite angles. But say if you have 10 degrees at the axle, you want the same 10 degrees at the transmission. So I am gonna have to cut those perches off. Luckily, they're just tack welded. They're not completely burned in. So that is number one. Number two, I want to avoid building a driveline spacer as much as I can because I really don't have the tools to do it right, to actually have like that hub-centric ring around the inside of it to actually center it all. I don't have the tools to make it right. So I think what I'm going to do, which is going to solve a couple problems, I'm going to drop the engine and the transmission a little bit and probably tilt it back a little bit towards the axle, drop the transmission a little bit more than the motor. So what I'm going to do is, first things first, cut those tacks off, get the pinion angle drop back down where it should be, and then I'm going to drop the tranny. I'm just going to get the jack under it, let some bolts out, drop it down to where I got an acceptable angle from the driveline to the transmission, and then I'm going to see if I can match it at the axle and see if that driveline is going to work as is. So that's kind of the game plan. Sometimes you just need a breath of fresh air. I just get in the zone, I go to work, and I don't really think everything through sometimes. So it's nice to take a step back every once in a while, kind of think about what you're doing, and come back at it with a better game plan. Well, after some messing around, I think I got this thing set right where I'm about happy with it. So the front cross member for the engine is dropped a 1/2 inch. The rear one here is dropped 3/4 of an inch. And I got about 7 degrees at that flange and about 9 at this flange. They say you want both U-joints within 3 degrees of each other. So I'm gonna kind of cheat it a little bit and bring this up just a little bit to try to pull this driveline in a little bit more. But right there is actually looking pretty good. We still have quite a bit of slip. It's only pulled out of the tranny an inch, and there's probably like 4 inches of slip. So you don't want it honestly too far in, because if you compress the suspension and push the driveline into that transfer case, you can actually blow out your transfer case. So I think we're happy with that. I'm going to make some drop brackets. I got some 1/2 inch aluminum plate over there for the fronts. This 3/4, I don't think I have any 3/4 inch plate. I'm either gonna stack a couple up or I'm just going to grab some round spacers. There's really not much weight hanging on this cross member here, so I'm not too worried about making it super strong. So let's get these bolted in 100% and make sure our driveline angles are good once we get this 100%, and then we'll go through and weld in our spring perches. Alright guys, I'm finally happy with how this thing's sitting. So I got, as you saw, the 1/2 inch plate there. I got the 1/2 and a 1/4 here. I think I'm actually going to leave them separate, so in the future if I do change anything, I got a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch instead of welding those together. So I got the driveline set. The transmission's sitting about 7 degrees and the rear axle sitting about 8, so they're very close. If you look at that drive shaft, you can see that line that I made right here going up and down. That is the driveline fully stuffed into that transfer case. So we're sitting about 1 inch out of the transfer case. Like I said, that slip joint has like 3 or 4 inches, so we should be pretty good on that. Alright guys, we're making some progress. So these old shocks right here are completely blown out and way too short. So I got these Monroe shocks. I'll link these down in the description if you guys want to check these out. But the way the stock shocks mounted was on that plate. Now that plate is going to be on top of the leaf here. We're going to basically do a U-bolt flip. So the U-bolts are going to come from the bottom. So there's nothing hanging down here. And obviously this shock, you can see, was going to be way too long. So I made up these tabs. These honestly were a little bit long for even down here, so that's why I kind of had to rotate these tabs underneath. But they turned out really good. I just wanted to knock those out of the way, get those done with. So now let's fully weld everything in. And then I want to tackle this e-brake setup. You can see here, like I said, my plan is I'm just going to cut this tube on either side of that, rotate this whole thing down, and the e-brake will mount kind of where the cables are right now, and that'll work just fine. All right, we got everything painted up, so we are good to go there. We're gonna let that dry. What I want to do is pull off those spacers there for both cross members, take the shackles, and also these. I want to powder coat all this stuff black. Obviously, we got to sandblast it all first. I really don't like that chrome. It kind of looks off, and then obviously I want to keep this stuff from rusting, but I got something special I want to show you guys. I picked up a new camera lens, so the rest of this video is going to be shot with this. This is a Tamron 28-75 f2.8, so it should be a pretty decent camera lens. Let me know what you guys think. It'll probably take me a little bit to get used to it, to get my camera dialed in with this lens, but let me know if you see an improvement or if it's worse. Let me know what you guys think. All right, guys, we are back together, back on the ground. I must say, it's sitting about perfect. The back might be just a touch higher than the front, but that's kind of actually how they came from the factory, with the front kind of sitting down like that. But either way, I'm very, very happy with how the rear turned out. Yeah, it ended up being a lot more work than I originally anticipated, just because it lifted it so much more. But all in all, I think I'll be happy with it, just because I got a lot more ground clearance now. We got new shocks, all the goodies, and look at all that clearance underneath where the shackles used to hang down. I cut 4 inches out of those shackles, so everything's tucked up a lot better and looking much, much better. Oh, by the way, I took the muffler off when I was working under there because it was in the way, and I didn't put it back on. She sounds kind of built. Let's go rip it. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up right here. We got a lot more stuff to do to this thing. Very excited. Definitely stay tuned for the next videos. And as always, go check out Prismatic Powders for all your powder coating stuff. Like I said, they have so much amazing powder coats. So go check them out at prismaticpowders.com. I'll have a link down in the description box. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Go smash that thumbs up button, leave a comment, and let me know what you think. We'll see you guys in the next video.